I was in a hall with books, and I heard Dr. Weiss say something about pulling out a book from a shelf. One floated into my hands and opened to a page with a golden shimmering name written in large script at the top of the page. The name was Lucifer. It was not the most comforting thought, but I was too tired to judge or block the information. In this life, I was educated in Catholic schools from grade school to high school. At the age of approximately 9, sitting in my classroom, I can recall being taught about Satan and hell. I simply did not agree with the view of the nun. Wisely, I did not speak my views. I did believe in God. I knew the tale of Christ, but could not identify with him, and I did not go to church unless my mother made me. As an adult, I am very spiritual, but not religious. I believe in and communicate with Christ, God, and the angels. I have read sections of the Bible, although my views are not necessarily in agreement with it. I have come to understand that Lucifer was misunderstood in the Bible, but that he did start the ball rolling in a negative direction, a perspective I had blocked for years. Here is what I was told during my regression at your workshop. Lucifer was the closest to perfection, but he was informed that he could not return to the ultimate source because of the great separation. As a whole group of souls, we decided to separate from God. Lucifer was heartbroken over the separation, then he became angry, and out of anger, or vanity, he tried to hurt God by hurting himself. It was a temper tantrum of biblical proportions. Lucifer was not the evil Satan as portrayed in the Bible. I do not believe that he sits on people's shoulders and tempts them into wrongdoing, contrary to the beliefs of some of my friends. However, we are all responsible for our actions, even angels. Because of my fatigue, I could only witness what came to me that day. The next scene was short and in high definition, with vivid colors. Looking down, I saw my white, male, bare feet, which were clean and pristine, walking on pretty grass. I looked up, and a voluptuous woman with long, curly blonde hair was walking toward me. Eve? I thought. I believe this Eve was the one from the biblical story of the Garden of Eden. In my view, Adam and Eve were angels. In a story that was channeled through me, I learned that a normal human body could not survive the change to Earth's heavy dimension. This is partly the reason angels were called upon for the job. This deviated from the biblical story. The tree of knowledge was a choice. It was not forbidden. It was God's gift to understand what love is not, and to lead us to better understand what love is. Adam and Eve left Eden and went on to other places out of necessity. They did not leave because God yelled at them to get out. The guided meditation at your workshop allowed me not only glimpses from a book in the Heavenly Hall of Records, but also possibly a past life regression to witness Eve. Information regarding Adam and Eve and now Lucifer continues to present itself in some form or another and keeps calling for my attention. Helen. During times of fatigue, just as in dreams, our everyday waking consciousness is less vigilant. It does not filter so strictly, which allows the subconscious mind to emerge. In transcending the rational and literal training of her Catholic schools, Helen could experience a deeper and richer meaning to the characters, stories, and legends. Sometimes ignorance or unwise decisions are mistakenly viewed as evil. We learn and grow from all our choices, both good and bad. To understand love in all its manifestations, even by appreciating what love is not, seems like a divine gift. To be yelled at does not. Could you truly appreciate light if you never knew darkness? Michael's message. I went to a full weekend workshop at the Agape Spiritual Center in Los Angeles in early 2002. That Friday evening, as Brian began the first regression, I went immediately into a meditative state, from 0 to 60 and nothing flat. I recall taking myself into my grove, where I go when I meditate, and suddenly there was my grandfather. He was laughing and waving for me to come after him, so I followed and found myself at the staircase. I said, "But, Grandpa, you are getting ahead of Brian." He just laughed as he glided down the stairs, and naturally I followed, yelling for him to wait up the whole way. When we reached the bottom, there was a door. He opened it, pulled me in, and then smiled and disappeared. I cannot even describe the colors that I saw when I looked toward the lights inside the door. I do not believe there is a human word that can encompass the beauty and serenity. I knew nothing but the name of the archangels. I had never studied about them or looked into their attributes. Yet somehow I knew that I was standing in the presence of Michael. I can still see him in that somehow colorless and color-filled light. I will never forget that moment. He stood, simply leaning with his forearms on his sword with his wings folded behind him. I, being as quiet and demure as always, said, "Well, that isn't a very angelic pose." He flipped the sword up and extended his wings, holding the sword aloft for a moment, and then flipped the sword back down and gave me a sardonic look. I felt him say, "Better?" with a chuckle, and I said, "Much." I have no idea how much time passed before I heard Brian say, "Look at what is around you." "Shouldn't you be showing me something?" I asked Michael, and I received an amused look as he pulled one wing in to show me myself in a glade in the woods, surrounded by animals, happy and alone as I took care of them. Then the wing moved back out, and once again all I saw was Michael. I heard Brian tell us to go to the end of the life. "Well?" I said to Michael. Once again a wing moved, and I saw myself as an old woman with a walking stick, making my way into a city in either ancient Rome or Greece. I knew I was dying, and all I wanted was to reach the temple. When I did, I sighed, sat down on the marble steps, and died. It was so peaceful, no pain. I just needed to be at the temple when I died, and I was, so I was content. I asked Michael if there was anything I needed to know, and inside my mind I heard, "You are protected when you need to be." I then heard Brian counting upward from 1 to 10 to bring us out of the trance. I came out of the regression, and I've never since felt what I did at that moment. I've never before nor since experienced that kind of peace. Faith Susan. In my view, Michael's sword, which represents wisdom, cuts through and ends ignorance and fear. Without fear, we are able to embrace our spiritual nature, letting go of ego, pride, and jealousy. Without fear, we can love freely and practice compassion at all times. We will not be hurt. We do not have to suffer. Faith's grandfather was the transitional, loving, and familiar being who led her to a higher state of awareness. Michael met her in the light, just beyond the door. Her fears dissolved. There was only peace. Each one of us is protected when we need to be. Angels, guides, and gods belong not only to the Judeo-Christian tradition, but to many of the world's great religions and cultures. During a group regression, a workshop participant named Keith recalled a very spiritual and emotional moment that had occurred when he was quite young, and as he spoke, he described what he saw with childlike terms. He was a little boy when he witnessed the appearance of 2 guides or apparitions in his room. One was an old Chinese man with a long white beard, and the other was a kind of angelic figure. They took Keith to a much less dense place, a floating place, where people were coming and going with information and knowledge. Earth was far off in the background, and he could see how these people were arriving at and leaving it. They were not doing so in their physical bodies, but rather in their spiritual bodies, their energy bodies. Keith watched as they were drawn to this planet by ties to other souls. As he re-experienced this childhood memory, Keith was able to glimpse the bigger picture. He sensed how we come to and leave this denser world, and how we return to the floating place. We come to this school to learn our lessons, and then we return home. His account reminded me of another story, one of a young boy and a bearded Chinese man, which I recounted in my second book, Through Time into Healing. Born with congenital heart defects, a young boy required open-heart surgery at ages 3 months, 2½ years, and again at 5 years. The boy nearly died several times during the operations, and his doctors did not expect him to survive. When he was 8 years old, he revealed to his mother that, while still unconscious after one of the surgeries, he had been visited in the intensive care unit by 8 Chinese guys who conveyed information about his recovery. The boy observed that one of the Chinese men had a sword that he was always twirling around. This man frequently cut off his beard with the sword, but the beard grew back almost immediately. The boy described all 8 Chinese guys in detail. In researching her son's startling story, his mother found the physical and philosophical representation of her son's 8 Chinese guys. They are the Ba Xian, or 8 immortals, Taoist representations of historical figures who have attained immortality. As her son described, one of these is Lu Tengpin, the patron saint of barbers, who was granted a magic sword as a reward for overcoming 10 temptations. The boy claims that he is still visited by the 8 Chinese guys who continue to provide him with information. This is his direct mystical experience of truth and guidance, which he accepts completely, joyfully, and unquestioningly, and which provides him with comfort in traumatic and frightening moments. Unencumbered with an adult's mental filter of what is right and wrong, to think and believe, this child is able to accept both a direct source of guidance and a direct experience of spirituality. Unlike his very curious and well-intentioned mother, he has no need to research the facts. Another spiritual figure regarded by the Taoists as an immortal is Kuan Yin, or Kuan Yin, who is also venerated by Buddhists as the embodiment of mercy. A quintessential source of infinite and unconditional love, she graced the author of the story that you are about to hear with her presence, and in doing so, changed her life forever. It is said that, in the belief system of Chinese Buddhists, the mindful state of feeling at peace with oneself and with others is Kuan Yin. The very principles of loving kindness and compassion are Kuan Yin. To feel, behave, and think in accordance with these values is Kuan Yin, and the person who does so is Kuan Yin. The world, in its current state, could use more Kuan Yin. The Goddess of Compassion. I had been working and living in the hospitality industry for 3 years in Beijing in the early 90s. It was a fantastic experience, and while it was a hard existence living there, I also loved it. A few years later, a job opportunity presented itself in New Zealand, and I jumped at the chance to travel to a new culture. I was pretty burned out after my experience in China, so I decided that it was time to begin changing my career from stress-inducing to stress-relieving. I made a step to follow what my guidance had shared with me, and that was to learn hypnosis. I totally enjoyed every moment of my studies and became qualified as a hypnotherapist, successfully integrating neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and emotional freedom technique, EFT, into my work at my clinic in Dunedin. Over a decade later, the relationship with one of my soulmates came to an end. I made the difficult decision to leave. I was going through deep, challenging issues at the time. I was filled with doubt, fear, and uncertainty, and I questioned my decision to leave the relationship. I decided to go to Dr. Weiss's course at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. Every day that week, we experienced 2 past life regressions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. I shifted and released many things. Some of the regressions were profound for me, and one linked directly with my time in China. During that regression, facilitated by Dr. Weiss, I uncovered a lifetime in which I had been a helper and student of a goddess. Her name was Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion. I immediately knew her and recognized her energy signature. I was overwhelmed with joy in the regression to see her, to feel her energy, and to be with her again. It became clear during the regression that I had lived a very peaceful experience with Kuan Yin and had spent a lot of time around her, studying and being in her energy. In that life, when I was lying on my deathbed, she came and stood beside me. As I was going through the transition of dying, just before my soul left my body, she placed her hand gently over the center of my chest. A golden light and energy expanded through my whole heart. The feeling was extraordinary, like I had come home. I wept. I felt so much peace and love. She said to me in the final moments of that life that she would be forever with me in my heart for the rest of my days and for eternity. I was overcome with emotion. It was an extremely powerful experience that day, and it still moves me to tears. Re-experiencing that life reignited the feeling in my heart, too. It was so beautiful. I felt as if I were floating in a perfect dream state. The regression was then brought to a close, and we were allowed time to integrate. The understandings that I gained after it were incredible. I felt I had been searching for the same deep companionship, friendship, understanding, gentleness, and peace my whole life. It was not a dream. I had already experienced it in that existence, and now I had proof that this kind of relationship was possible in my present life, too. My inability to let go of my soulmate relationship in New Zealand now made sense. I still wished and hoped that we could have had a similar connection to that which I had experienced with Kuan Yin, but it was not to be. I also began to understand the 3 years that I had spent in China. How I had loved the Chinese people and their food, felt at home there, and picked up the language, and how much I had adored exploring the old parts of Beijing. I had been brought up a Christian in this life, although I later felt little resonance with some aspects of that faith. But I had images and statues of Kuan Yin everywhere. The understanding and connection had not been made in my heart, mind, and soul until that regression with Dr. Weiss. Lying there in the hall after the regression, I reflected on the fact that 2 of my best friends in primary school in North Wales were Chinese twins. It all made sense, as did my deep connection with the goddess Kuan Yin. I understand why I had been totally drawn to this goddess. She had vowed to remain on this planet and not ascend until all beings on earth experienced compassion in their hearts. This was her mission. My work in this life involved the combination of EFT, NLP, hypnosis, and other spiritual tools. I instinctively knew very early on, when working with clients, that for deep healing to occur at a profound soul level, there had to be compassion and forgiveness, not only of others, but also of self. So many threads began to come together in my mind in an extraordinary way that day. This experience shone a new, humbling light on the tapestry of my work, life, and existence. What is also interesting is that I am back in China again. I am currently writing this while visiting Shanghai. I visit twice yearly, teaching EFT and other spiritual techniques. I am about to embark on a new journey, developing and teaching courses that will incorporate a number of spiritual techniques, including, of course, past life regression. I feel strongly that I am being guided by Kuan Yin, who I know is with me now, always, and forever. I am grateful that your skill and tools have exposed this link within me, with ancient China, the goddess Kuan Yin, my journey, and my work. Michelle Hardwick. Kuan Yin has many names and manifestations. As the Bodhisattva of compassion, she exists in every culture and religion, helping us through our pain and suffering in this physical dimension until we all reach a state of deep peace, unconditional love, and enlightenment. At that point, our incarnations can end, and we may choose to stay in the spiritual realms. If we can conceive of and feel divine energy entering our hearts, just as Michelle felt Kuan Yin's, we would be able to fully comprehend that beautiful promise, "I will be with you always to the end of time." This is the same promise Michelle heard. She would be forever with me, in my heart, for the rest of my days and for eternity. Love is forever. It surrounds us at all times. Like Michelle, I have had my own past life connection to China. On a trip there several years ago, I was meditating early one morning with monks in the Wutai mountain area, deep within the country. During the meditation, I had an image of myself as a general of some sort, a leader of people. The memory seemed to be several thousand years old. I was sitting on a white horse up on a hill, overlooking a vast field. From this elevated vantage point, I could look down at the valley below and see all my people, the people that I was entrusted to protect and take care of, to safeguard. My heart was so filled with love and compassion for them. I felt especially blessed to have such a position of responsibility and privilege, and I wanted every single being in that vista to feel the way that I did, to have a heart overflowing with kindness, caring, protectiveness, and the sense that we were all linked together. I could see myself sitting on the horse and wearing a kind of primitive armor, with a breastplate made of horizontal bars of bamboo wood. I remember feeling that the horse was meaningful too, and that he and I were also connected. At that moment, I vowed to bring this sense of deep and compassionate love that so filled my heart to all the beings in this entire area and beyond. That became my goal. It is a vow that I continue to make on a daily basis, one from which this book, as well as all my work, is born. In some of my regressions or meditations, I will have mere glimpses of past lives, while at other times it is more like a movie in which events progress from past to present to future. But in this one glimpse, for I did not see the whole lifetime, the feeling state was far more significant than any details. What was important was to take that vow, to wish that all the other beings in that entire land could feel the same way, and to know that I would do everything in my power to bring that about. I had this experience and wrote this account before ever hearing Michelle's story, yet how alike they are. Michelle wrote of Kuan Yin, "She had vowed to remain on this planet and not ascend until all beings on earth experienced compassion in their hearts. This was her mission. That had been my mission as well. Perhaps at that long-ago moment on the hilltop, as I looked over my people, Kuan Yin had placed her loving hands on my own heart, just as she had done with Michelle." As I mentioned, some regressions are powerful not for the concrete details they provide, but for the deeply transcendent emotions they generate. Your subconscious mind knows where it must go for healing, and you can trust it to lead it to the experience that you most need. When this happened to Nathaniel, the author of the next story, his life did not merely transform, it began. The nature of love. I will never be the same after seeing you at your San Francisco workshop. Not long ago, I was given a diagnosis of terminal emphysema and congestive heart failure. My life, needless to say, is filled with constant physical pain. I came to your event expecting to uncover a past life, but much to my surprise, I did not go to one, nor did I go to my childhood as you had instructed us. Instead, I found myself leaving my body behind, floating above it into a universe that was filled with infinite beauty and love. I can only describe it as a wonderfully deathless, near-death experience. It was the first peace I had known since my diagnosis, and its memory carries me through the difficult days that lie ahead. There is no death. I know this because I went there, to this place of unconditional love, and I came back to tell its story. The veil that separates us from being constantly aware of this love was parted for me that day. There is never any reason or anything to fear. There is only love, a love that is indiscriminate and absolutely universal. Contrary to what I had always believed, no judgment awaited me. Love does not know how to judge. It embraces without any limits or conditions. We are judged by people all day long, but never by God, whom I believe to be the source of this love. My pain was gone. Love can heal also. I had not had a painless moment in recent memory. The relief that I experienced during the regression defies description. Do you know what hate feels like? 10,000 pounds upon our shoulders. Every time that we are judged or we judge others, another pound is added, until our bodies are so heavy that we cannot move. When we speak of the weight of the world bearing down upon us, this is what it means. And yet I never realized what a burden I had been carrying my entire life. I had become used to it. That day at the workshop, it disappeared. I soared without meaning to. There was simply nothing to hold me down. And we do not even need to do anything special to fly, just transform ourselves from beings of hate into beings of love. It may sound lofty, but it could not be simpler or more instantaneous. The key to happiness and freedom has been in our hands our entire lives. We just never thought to look down to see what they held. Our bodies are delicate. They ache, they age, they die. To have a body is to have suffering. They are important, for we come into them and into this planet to learn, but there are great growing pains in the process. Once we throw the bodies off, we realize that we are more than we ever imagined we could possibly be. When I had found out that my death was approaching, I feared what came next. But now I know what comes next. We go to the afterlife. We are healed. We are loved. It is pure bliss. It is the exact opposite of fear. How did we manage to get it so backward? Afterward, I returned home, but the memory of that experience has stayed with me to this day. The pain returns from time to time, but I can tolerate it now. Just knowing that this place awaits me, that it awaits us all, gives me great comfort. I feel that when I die, I will return to that state of bliss that I experienced during those life-changing moments at your workshop. I have told other people about what I learned that day. This has become a purpose in my life, to help others. We all have this purpose, actually. We are all important, every last one of us. Although we may behave badly out of ignorance or fear or judgment, we ourselves are never bad. That is not a word that can ever describe a soul. If, for just a few short moments, everybody could feel the love that I felt, there would be no more war, no more violence. Why would anyone want to hurt a soul? I know all these things now, and although the end of my life may be approaching, it is, in a sense, just starting. I am at peace. Nathaniel Peterson. Love does not know how to judge, Nathaniel states. It embraces without any limits or conditions. We know this innately, but we keep forgetting, and we suffer because we forget. We have been taught metaphors to help us remember. The sun shines on prisons as well as churches. The rain falls on weeds as well as flowers. But we still forget. We allow ourselves to be judged by others, accepting their projections and distortions, and in doing so, we lose a bit of our confidence and self-esteem. Instead, we should fill ourselves with self-love. We should remember our true nature as an immortal spiritual being, an eternal soul who is always loved and who is never alone. The Zen monk Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "The wave does not need to die to become water. She is already water. Nor do we need to die to become the spiritual beings that we already are. Nathaniel has lost his fear of death. He has glimpsed the other side of the veil and found it to be pure love. He can fulfill his purpose and squarely face his prognosis. Death is not a mystery to him. Our lives always hold a deep meaning and a profound purpose. Although the end of my life may be approaching, says Nathaniel, it is, in a sense, just starting. The outlook that has resulted from his workshop experience has given him a new life, one that, even if it is indeed nearing its end, is much more peaceful and satisfying. But what if what we have always thought of as the end is actually just the beginning? Jade, in the final story of this book, depicts this glorious possibility. The end is only the beginning. I attended one of Dr. Weiss's past life regression seminars in 2010 in Denver, Colorado. Only 7 months prior to this event, I lost my sweetheart, Christian, to a sudden and unexpected death. It was the worst thing I had ever experienced, and it left me a basket case with so many painful thoughts and questions. At the same time, I had also spontaneously remembered a tragic past life with Christian and me that had ended in a similar fashion, which left me feeling even worse. Because I was so distraught about these losses, Christian's aunt told me about Dr. Weiss and recommended that I go to an event, saying that maybe I would find some answers, or at least feel better. I looked him up and read his books, and they gave me some peace of mind. But when I found out that he was going to be as close as Colorado, I took the opportunity to travel and attend his event. My experience there has helped me so much by changing my perspective. It was the first regression of the day after Dr. Weiss had introduced himself and prepared us for what might be expected and experienced within the context of our time with him. When he put us into a deep state of hypnotic regression, of course I expected to go into a past life, just as I had done times before while listening to his regression CD. I remember that he had just come to the part where he gives the suggestion to go back to the earliest childhood memory, which I did. Like a child, I found myself in wonder and anticipation of the adventure I would soon discover when he took me back to a previous life. What past life clues and remnants would I uncover? What would they teach me about my life and myself? I can't be exactly certain of the words he spoke at the moment of crossing over that threshold between this life and another one, but what I heard was to step through the door and into the light. I did so with no hesitation. To my delighted surprise, I found myself being drawn into a tunnel of beautiful light. When he asked us to look down to see what type of footwear and clothing we were wearing, I was taken aback to see that my feet were bare, and that I was wearing a long robe-like gown. In an instant, I realized where I must have been, and although it didn't make much sense to my brain, I went with the experience. It was as real as if my eyes were wide open. Within the tunnel of this warm illumination, I saw the figures of beings. I did not see their faces, but I could feel strong presences. The predominant presence I felt was the spirit of my mother, who had crossed over nearly 40 years ago when I was just a girl. There were others, too, but I was so enamored by the energy of the light that I could not shift my focus away from it. I became aware that I was weightless, and I was experiencing this wonderful new floating sensation. Every part of me felt as if it were being immersed and bathed in the sweetest, most cleansing energy. It was as though I had died and gone to heaven. The bliss was consuming, and there was nowhere that love was not. I remember thinking that I could stay in this loving light forever. Feeling so peaceful and fulfilled, I knew there was nothing that I could ever want or need again. Next, without knowing how I got there, I went from floating in the tunnel to some sort of transition area. It seemed like a hospital, except there was none of the equipment that you would normally see in a hospital on Earth. I knew what it looked like because I was in two places at the same time. I was both consciously observing and experiencing what was happening while I lay unconscious. I saw myself lying on a flat, illuminated surface, which, for lack of a better word, I will call a bed. This bed was most curious. I could both see and feel its amazing pulsating energy. I could feel its subtle vibration. It appeared to be made of smooth crystalline rock, which radiated brightly as it so amazingly energized my spirit and soul. It had a magnetic quality about it, and like the light in the tunnel, the bed was alive with intelligence. I could feel that something extremely special was happening to me. It seemed to have a healing, restorative quality and effect about it. I watched while the unconscious part of me lay there, lifeless, while my sweetheart, Christian, who had passed only 7 months earlier, was trying to rouse me into the awareness of this heavenly bliss. Although there was a very conscious part of me in that heavenly realm, another part of my consciousness was still lagging behind, maybe in the bliss of the tunnel, or perhaps still in the life that had been departed. Interestingly enough, the conscious me somehow knew information surrounding my death. I knew that it was sudden and unexpected. I knew it had something to do with my throat area. I got the impression that the cause of death was asphyxiation. I may have choked, but the point that fascinated me was that the sleeping one I was observing on that bed did not yet know that she had left the earthly realm. In her life, what had surfaced as previous past lives for her were many memories of dying horrible deaths while staying in the body until that last terrifying gasp of air. But this time was different. Because her spirit had left before seeing the face of death, there was no struggle, not even a hint of pain or fear involved with the process, so there was no realization yet of a passing. The body just died without drama, and now she found herself experiencing this incredible peace and freedom. From the perspective of the sleeping beauty lying there, I had the sensation of being in a deep dream state from which I was ever so slowly waking up, as if from a strong dose of anesthesia. As I was coming to, I could hear my beloved Christian speaking faintly at first, his words then growing louder. I heard him say, "Sweetheart, wake up. It's me. Come on, love, wake up. I'm here with you." As I heard these words in the far-off distance, I was confused about where to focus my consciousness. Which was the dream, and which was the reality of my situation? I could both see and sense the presence of other loved ones with me, all of my beloveds watching over me with great care and attention, awaiting the reunion of that very moment when I would wake from my slumber and open my eyes to be greeted and welcomed into the overflowing joy that love is. It reminded me so much of the mood of anticipation and excitement that is present when a new baby is about to come into the world. As I mentioned before, I was encountering this whole scene from what seemed to be two quite different perspectives. It was fascinating. But what I am realizing is a possible third perspective. I experienced them both, and now another one is writing the both of them. Perhaps they are all aspects of me, only separated by diverse events in time. It was only because of the particular spirits who had previously passed before me that I believed that I was witnessing the actual death of my current earthly life. But, as I said, it seemed to be more about a birth into a wonderful new existence, one to which I needed to adjust and acclimate, rather than a death. I never got to wake up from my unconscious state to see what happened, because it was at this time that Dr. Weiss began the process of bringing us back from our hypnotic state and into the awareness of this earthly life. After I returned, it took a few minutes to begin to realize the implications of what had just occurred. In fact, several weeks later, I am still trying to comprehend them. However, despite my lack of full comprehension, this incident has given me so much more than I could have ever thought to ask for. It gave me the personal comfort of knowing that Christian will not only be there to greet me when I cross over, but that our love continues on. It has also helped me to deal with my fears about my own eventual passing. By previewing and experiencing my death, I realize there is nothing I need to be afraid of when it is my turn to walk through death's door, for beyond that threshold is unimaginable freedom and bliss. I am forever thankful that I was given this wonderful opportunity. It has truly been a gift. Jade Kramer. What if death is really just a birth into a beautiful realm of peace, a realm in which, as Jade says, there is nowhere that love is not? What if our departed loved ones gather with great anticipation to welcome our birth on the other side, to be reunited once again? Then, like Jade and Nathaniel, we would lose our fear of death, and we would embrace life with more joy and more purpose. In my book, Same Soul, Many Bodies, I document numerous precognitive dreams and journeys to the near and far future. This is entirely feasible because, as modern physics describes, time is relative and quite different from our conscious perceptions and understanding. It is possible to see the future. Recently, a woman responding to an interview of mine with a description of her own near-death experience unknowingly echoed Jade's words. "I realized that life is like a dream," she wrote. "When you are born, you wake up into mortality in this physical body. When your physical body dies, you return to immortality. I'm not afraid to die anymore. It is like going home." We sang this truth as children, yet as adults we have forgotten. Life is but a dream, and how merrily we must partake in it as we sail down the stream of time. The author Catherine Frank writes about time as a deep pool rather than a fast-flowing river. What if time is indeed more like a lake than a swift stream, having depth instead of flow? All our memories, thoughts, and actions are stored there and can be retrieved by entering those deep waters. They do not flow away. They are never lost. We can enter the water whenever we wish. And when we are finished with time, we walk out of the lake and sit on its shore, as everyone we have ever known and loved comes to welcome us back, and the brilliant light restores our souls. Both Jade and Nathaniel, and countless people across the world who have shared their experiences with me, call this shore bliss. It is bliss. It is the source. Every word and every page of this book tells its story. It is the breath from which the cosmos is created. It exists before and beyond all dimensions. It precedes all space, all emptiness, all matter, all forces, and all energies. It is the timeless precursor of all that is. It is the origin of the field and of all intention. It is love itself, and it is that which begets love. It is known by many names, but is beyond knowing. It is our true home. It is where we take off our bodies and our masks one last time and cast them into the eddy of eternity. It is where we finally realize that most transcendent truth of our soul's everlasting nature, of its journey into the beautiful dream which is life. It is where, after thousands and thousands of dreams, we awaken, and it is where, after thousands and thousands of births, we are born. The end is only the beginning. This concludes Miracles Happen by Brian L. Weiss, M.D., and Amy E. Weiss, M.S.W. Narrated by Kevin Foley. Copyright 2012 by Brian L. Weiss and Amy E. Weiss.